Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, if you look across, well, all of history, ancient monarchies, modern democracies, everything in between, they all seem to have this frustrating knack for failing systemically.
Yeah, it's always something, isn't it? Corruption, gridlock, tyranny, sometimes just plain old greed, these huge boom and bust cycles.
Exactly. It feels like we've been trying to run society on the same buggy software for thousands of years and keep getting the same error messages.
Well, that's because, as we see it in the analysis, that failure isn't really a bug. It's more like a core feature of the design. Every system we've tried has some kind of fundamental contradiction built in, a flaw that leads it towards what we call negative utility, or suppressed will.
Well,
So today, we're really digging into the Paradise Reciprocity Economic Framework, PREF, and looking at it specifically as a resolution vector. How is it actually engineered system by system to fix those specific catastrophic flaws? We're aiming for that positive vector, greater good and proactive will, or plus U, plus U.
got it. So let's start where a lot of these power structures start and often end up centralized, maybe even selfish control. These systems that tend towards the greed zone and have that classic single point of failure problem.
Exactly. Think about your classic monarchy or Plato's Republic with its philosopher king, or even a theocracy. What's the common thread?
They're basically betting the farm on one person being good or smart, or on a set of rules never needing to change.
Precisely. It's a gamble. Is the king competent, sane? Is the dogma actually, true and adaptable? If not, the whole thing can just collapse or seize up, stagnate.
Seems like a terrible bet to make for an entire society.
And I saw it.
So how does PREF get around this gamble on who happens to be in charge?
Right. It replaces that gamble of birth or selection with systemic competence, built-in accountability. Something called the Governance Vector Audit, the GVA. It uses the Hegemonic Score, the H score, which measures the actual positive contribution of every public official. It's not about popularity, it's data. So the system is designed so only people who are demonstrably high performers aligned with that greater good vector can actually stay in those stewardship roles. It's structurally embedded.
So it's less about punishing bad apples after the fact and more about making sure continuously that only competence and positive impact keep you in the job, making failure visible and, well, unsustainable.
You got it. And for the theocracy problem, that reliance on rigid, unchanging dogma PREF uses the truth engine.
Your truth engine.
Yeah, it's basically a constitutional mandate.
Yeah.
All analysis, all policy has to update based on new verifiable evidence. It makes the system inherently anti-dogmatic. It must adapt to reality.
Okay, that deals with the risks of concentrated power at the top. But what about systems built almost entirely on extraction? Like kleptocracy ruled by theft, or fascism and nationalism, which the sources call the ultimate greed zone. That's pure negative vector stuff, right? Using a myth to justify taking from others.
Yeah, pure plus. In the case of fascism, driving will towards a negative goal. For kleptocracy, the fix is pretty direct, radical transparency. It changes the whole financial plumbing. Public funds move mainly through return on investment, ROI, not taxes that are frankly easier to divert. And the H-score and GVA together act like a constant financial scan, exposing corruption in government and corporations. Makes systemic theft really hard to hide, and more importantly, hard to profit from.
Okay, transparency helps kill the theft. But fascism relies on that us versus them myth, that exclusion. How do you counter that fundamentally?
With something called the MANN protocol, mutually assured neutrality and nationality.
MANN protocol.
Yeah. It's designed as the direct antidote. It constitutionally guarantees cultural protection and expression for everyone within the system. So the whole idea of a privileged in-group that gets to exploit an out-group, it just dissolves. The in-group becomes universal by definition.
So you defang the core justification.
Exactly. And again, the truth engine acts as the myth killer. Policy has to be based on objective, verifiable reality, not some nationalist or racial story designed for mobilization and extraction. It rejects those foundational lies.
Okay, so PREF tackles concentrated power with accountability and transparency. Let's flip to the other side of the coin. What about systems where the problem is too little control, or maybe systems designed for conflict and gridlock?
Right. We pivot from that single point of failure risk to the problem of, distributed dysfunction.
Yeah.
Think about democracies. Direct democracy, for instance, sounds great, but it has the tyranny of the majority problem. 51% can vote to oppress the other 49%. That's a clear negative utility vector.
Yeah, definitely.
And then republics, or representative democracies, they suffer from the agency problem. The representatives start serving their own interests, getting reelected, pleasing lobbyists instead of the people they represent. Classic conflict of interest.
So PREF apparently has a safeguard against that tyranny of the majority. How does that work without just creating a new tyranny? It mentions this Hegemonic Analysis Bureau, the HAB. Who gives them the power to block a majority vote?
Good question. It's crucial that the HAB isn't based on political opinion or ideology. It uses predictive modeling, crunching data from the H-score system to forecast the likely long-term impact of a proposed law.
So it's projecting consequences.
Exactly. If the projection shows verifiable systemic harm, especially to a minority, or to the overall system stability, hitting that vector, the law gets flagged as non-compliant. It can't pass, even if it's popular. It's meant to be an ethical circuit breaker based on data, not a political veto.
And data-driven ethical backstop. Okay. And the fix for the Republic's agency problem, source material calls it beautifully clean. Abolishing the politician as lawmaker rule. How does that function?
Yeah, it separates the jobs. You still have elected officials called shepherds, but their role is just to identify problems and articulate the needs of their constituents. They bring the issues forward.
But they don't write the laws.
Nope. Specialist guilds, experts in relevant fields, analyze the problem, and other analysts design potential solutions based on that data and analysis. The shepherds don't vote on the final policy or control the funding.
So it disconnects the fundraising and re-election pressure from the actual legislative outcome.
Precisely. It severs that link that creates the agency problem.
Okay, let's go to the extreme end, basically. No control. Anarchy. Or maybe anarcho-capitalism. ANCAP. The critique is anarchy creates a power vacuum filled by the most ruthless, right? The new greed zone. And it can't handle big collective problems like infrastructure, the tragedy of the commons.
Yeah, and ANCAP tends towards corporate neo-feudalism, where private defense forces lead to the strongest company basically becoming the government. Unaccountable power again.
So how does PREF address this? It needs some structure, but avoids the pitfalls of the state.
It aims to architect what the sources call the good state, aiming for that, plus C. It provides the necessary coordination but keeps it accountable. You have things like public works guilds and the multi-ecocultural merger oversight model, MMOM, to handle the large-scale stuff, infrastructure, environment that purely local or anarchic systems just can't manage effectively.
Right. You need some level of coordination for complex problems.
And crucially, to prevent the warlord problem of anarchy, there's the R&D Guild. It holds a benign, strictly controlled, purely defensive monopoly on force, but it's governed by the GVA and H-score, so it remains accountable to the greater good vector. Not a tool for oppression.
Got it. And for ANCAP's failures.
The H-score is key there. It quantifies those externalities. ANCAP struggles with pollution, exploitation, and makes them unprofitable. You use incentives and targeted anti-vector taxes. It basically builds the non-aggression principle into the economic mechanics, solving the enforcement problem.
Okay, this is covering a lot of ground on political structures. But so many of these failures seem driven by the underlying economic engine. Let's get into those economic contradictions.
Absolutely. Because whether it's too much control or too little, the financial system itself often generates the negative vectors. Take pure laissez-faire capitalism.
The argument is it defaults to extraction.
Mathematically, yes. An unregulated market left to its own devices optimizes for profit above all else, which often means maximizing extraction and ignoring public good. Think pollution, inequality, instability, those massive boom-bust cycles.
Right. So PREF's answer is the hegemonic incentive engine, this H-score thing again, acting like a visible hand.
Kind of, yeah. The H-score directly links profitability to positive societal impact. Plus, companies that score well, that contribute positively, get advantages like vector-aligned capital grants. Essentially, you make more money by doing good, by solving problems instead of creating them. It steers the market.
And the boom-bust cycles.
That's where the foundational dividend, the FD, comes in. And this is important. It's funded by the system's return on investment, ROI, not primarily by taxes.
How does ROI funding stabilize things? Walk me through that during a crash scenario.
Right, so imagine a standard crash. Businesses fail, people lose jobs, demand just plummets because nobody has money or confidence, right?
Yeah, a downward spiral.
Okay. With the FD, because the system holds equity in all these high H-score productive companies, it receives dividends, ROI. That ROI flows directly to all citizens as a baseline income, the FD. So even if private employment crashes, there's still a constant floor of capital circulating in the economy. Demand cannot collapse to zero.
So it acts like an automatic shock absorber for demand.
Exactly. A permanent, systemic, automatic stabilizer built into the financial architecture itself. It smooths out those wild swings.
Okay, that's a very different model. Now contrast that with the opposite economic failure, state socialism or communism. The critiques there are usually about central planning being clunky and inefficient and needing authoritarianism to make it work, right? Suppressed will.
Correct. Central planning just can't process the sheer complexity and real-time data of a modern economy effectively. Leads to shortages, waste, and yeah, historically it's required force to ensure compliance.
So how does PREF avoid that?
It kind of flips the logic. Instead of central control, it harnesses decentralized will, plus CSS, that's done through the Civic Merit System, CMS, and the H-score incentives. You have millions of individuals voluntarily choosing how and where to contribute, guided by clear signals about what creates positive value.
So it's tapping into individual motivation.
Massively. It's far more dynamic and data-rich than any central committee could ever be, and critically, the whole system is opt-in, voluntary. The state acts more like a transparent investor and steward, based on the H-score data, not a central planner or owner dictating terms. Preserves freedom.
Okay, one more common model, democratic socialism or welfarism. The problem there is often called the golden goose problem.
Yeah, the idea that the welfare state relies on taxing a capitalist engine, but that engine's core drive, profit, extraction, often conflicts with the state's goals, welfare regulation. So you get this built-in inefficiency and conflict. The state is trying to restrain the very thing it depends on for funding.
Creates tension.
Exactly. PREF sidesteps this entirely by essentially becoming the golden goose.
How so?
Because the state, or the system framework, is primarily funded by its own ROI from its equity stakes in all those high H-score positive vector companies, not by high taxes on businesses it might be simultaneously trying to regulate heavily.
So the system's financial health is directly aligned with the success of its most productive ethical partners.
Precisely. The vector conflict just disappears. The state wants its high H-score partners to succeed because that success funds the foundational dividend and public works. Their interests are aligned.
That resolves the core conflict. Okay, this framework seems designed to tackle historical and current systems. But the sources say the ultimate test is resolving paradoxes in even aspirational systems, including fictional ones. Utopias.
Right. Can it fix the flaws even in our dreams of better worlds? Because often those dreams contain their own hidden contradictions.
Like the classic dystopias often presented as Utopia's Brave New World, maybe even Plato's Republic again. They achieve order, stability, plus fruit, sure, but they do it by crushing individuality, freedom, social mobility. Rigid castes, suppressed will.
Exactly. They trade freedom for stability, assuming it's a zero-sum game. PREF starts from the opposite axiom. Maximum prosperity plus sue is only possible through maximum proactive will. Plus, you need both.
How does it ensure that will doesn't get crushed for stability?
Through things like the Paradise Systema, which integrates the CMS and something called the Knowledge Inheritance Protocol. It's designed to create total dynamic social mobility based purely on verifiable contribution and mastery. If you contribute effectively, measured by H-score CMS, you advance. There are no fixed castes. It's the opposite of static social control.
Okay, what about those post-scarcity utopias? Things like FLGSC, fully automated luxury gay space communism, or maybe the Star Trek Federation, or the culture novels. They solve material needs, but the risk is, what? Boredom? Lack of purpose? The bored zone? Or maybe godlike AIs taking over agency?
Yeah, exactly that. If survival and comfort are guaranteed, what drives people? That's where the Civic Merit System, the CMS, comes in again. It provides a non-economic framework for meaning, status, and purpose.
Gamified contribution.
In a sense, it allows people to achieve recognition and fulfillment by contributing measurably to the greater good, solving complex problems, creating art, advancing knowledge, whatever aligns with positive vectors. It tackles the motivation problem head-on, keeping society dynamic, even after scarcity.
And the AI issue. The risk of benevolent dictatorships run by machines.
That's critical. PREF uses its advanced AI, the Truth Engine, the HAB, explicitly as tools to augment human decision-making and will. The whole no more bullshit democracy framework is about giving humans better data and analysis to make informed choices, not having the AI make the choices for them. Humans stay in the loop, augmented, plus not replaced or suppressed.
So the tech serves human agency, it doesn't override it.
That's the core design principle. And you see the opposite in something like Star Trek's Prime Directive. It sounds noble, but it's a rigid, inflexible dogma.
Yeah.
Often leads to ethically questionable inaction. It's a kind of plus stability via suppression of interaction or help.
And PREF replaces that with Dad, God, that's quite a name.
Huh? Yeah. It stands for Data-Aware Dynamic Governance Oversight Doctrine.
Okay, unpack that acronym.
It basically means policy, especially interaction policy, isn't based on one static rule like don't interfere. Instead, it uses continuous vector analysis, assessing the likely outcomes, plus F of different actions or inactions in real time based on the best available data. It guides ethical action using, for Nice's practical, contextual wisdom rather than a potentially flawed, rigid dogma. It's adaptive ethics.
Wow. Okay, so we've gone from ancient monarchies through capitalism and socialism all the way to sci-fi utopias.
Yeah.
And the claim is PREF offers a specific engineered fix for the core failure vector in every single one.
That's the argument presented in the sources, yes. The common mechanism through it all is vector alignment. Every tool, H-score, CMS, GVA, ROI funding, Truth Engine, is designed to make the path of positive utility, plus if, and proactive will, plus the path of least resistance.
Making it easier and more profitable to do good than to extract or oppress. Pushing society towards that blissful zone, plus wound.
Systematically replacing those old punitive or extractive mechanisms with constructive incentives.
Which circles back to that foundational philosophy mentioned in the sources, the law of altruism. This idea that real altruism comes from recognizing this tiny, unbridgeable gap, the 0.1 gap in understanding between any two minds.
Yeah, that fundamental separateness.
So if PREF or something like it actually worked on a global scale, what does it imply that maybe the most effective blueprint we could design for civilization is ultimately based not on achieving perfect unity or agreement, but on mathematically acknowledging that tiny, fundamental, unknowable space between each of us?
That's definitely something to chew on.
Indeed. Something for all of you to think about as you look at the systems shaping our own world. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.